This week for episodes 8 and 9, we have the stories of two New Yorkers, both of them sailors, and both of them with amazing stories. One tells the story of Sari Dienes, who was an artist who worked upstate New York and in the West Village. She was the founder of the Air Inn. And the second story is told by himself, Reed Stowe, who's been an artist in New York for many years and who sailed around the world without touching land for over 1,000 days. Please enjoy these two fascinating histories of art. What I love about Anchor is that it's given me creative control of my own material. I was approached by a big company to do a podcast about the art world, and I didn't want to sign over all rights to them. Anchor has allowed me to make this podcast and to keep creative control as well as financial control in terms of advertising. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place for free. You can use it on your phone or your computer. There are tools that help you to upload your recordings that you've done separately or on the app. They'll distribute it for you as well, which again, I couldn't wrap my mind around distribution, and they have it all there for you in one place: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and many more. You can easily make money from it as well. They help you advertise. As you can see right now, I'm getting my first ad out through Anchor. And all you have to do is download the app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Good luck with your podcast and getting your voice out there and owning your content. Thank you for joining us for episode 8 of the Bees and Honey podcast. In this Women in the Arts series, we speak to a man, Rip Hayman, who is a natural storyteller. He lived in New York in West Soho when that part of town was deserted and grumpy sailors hung out at the bar on the water near the West Side Highway on Spring Street. Friend and roommate with Hungarian emigre Sari Dienes, Rip tells how this artist, who worked all her life in a man's world, founded the Air Inn, a landmark bar still preserved today, and how she created art and influenced great male artists around her like Jasper Johns. So today I'm here with Rip Hayman, who is one of the owners of the building which houses the Air Inn. The Air Inn is a classic old-fashioned pub that's been here since 17-something, I believe. Anyways, Rip can tell us more about the history of the building, his history in the neighborhood, and also working with the artist Sari Dienes, whose foundation he heads now.
Yes, hello all out there in audio land. Pardon the birds, but they've come home to roost. And yeah, I've been a resident of the James Brown House, which is mostly known as the Air Inn pub. And as a college student, I moved in here with my buddies back when there was no plumbing or electricity up here. It was about to collapse and be made into a lovely parking lot. When we rented the upstairs 6 rooms for $100 a month, which we split 4 ways. So we basically had free rent to live in New York City, but we installed an outdoor shower. We finally put in a toilet, but the pipes would freeze. We'd leave every winter because it was uninhabitable, basically. Meanwhile, the pub kept going, and the old Sailors Pub, which was only open Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. till noon, was the morning bar, where all the dock workers and the union guys and the bookies and the sailors come off the ships, and so there'd be this hubbub in the morning. But they only had 1 kind of beer and 2 kinds of whiskey, and then they served no strangers, no youth, no women, and they'd stare at you like they were going to do something if you came through the door. And
What year was this?
Well, I moved here as a college student in 1973. That's the 20th century.
Yeah.
And I was 20 years old, whatever I was. So
Right. So yeah, if you looked like you were coming in the door, they would...
Oh, the only way I got this place is because it was raining so bad one day. I was looking for a cheap place to live downtown where there were all these lofts and all these empty spaces. It was just how tough you wanted to pioneer and build a space. And I was going to move to Dumbo to some big empty loft for the same amount of money, $100 a month with me and my buddies. But then we found this place, and we thought, well, this is a little more central to the city, and we could do anything we want over here because this is sort of the end of town. Nobody would come.
Mm-hmm.
The owner at the time was a woman who had inherited it from her grandfather. He ran the pub before Prohibition.
Wow.
And they turned it into some sort of a spiritual wellness center during Prohibition, and they added the dining room where the drinking was going on. When I came in here, there was a pool table and a strong house where the dining room is, and no food, just mean-looking old guys grumbling around. So then, but I said it was raining so much. It was raining all over the bar. They had buckets all over the place, and the bartender, God damn it, nobody will ever fix this. So I said, if you let me fix the roof and let me live upstairs, I'll fix it and it won't leak anymore. Well, for many decades, it's still the same deal. We're still trying to make it stop leaking, but we have, of course, a new roof, courtesy of the Glass House, who built this whole back structure steeled on to the masonry buildings to hold up the house.
Wow.
So they built this room. It used to be an outdoor roof. It used to be a backyard before they put up the dining room downstairs. And now we have it as just a guest house and an event space, somewhat, though it's mostly continues in its tradition of being a flop house, basically. But now we have to be dressed right with the right flip-flops to get in.
Right.
Now we have all these young UN representatives from around the world staying this week.
Because of the convention, yes. And
But
I
anyway,
had my party here, so
yeah.
that was a great art event. People
Yes,
dressed
I
up
still
as
have your
superheroes.
Batman mask, which I
Good.
wear whenever I go to UN conferences.
Well, tell us about Sari Dienes and how it came that you worked with her for some years, and what happened when she passed away, and the foundation, stuff like that too.
I had met Sari Dienes, the then 75-year-old artist, at a concert with John Cage, her old friend, and I had already been studying music and producing things, and so Sari knew these people, but she lived had her studio up in Rockland County, 50 miles north of the city, where Cage lived, and other artists had the commune up there, but she was always couch surfing in the city and staying when she could, but often she didn't have a place, and she didn't drive, and she was getting a little older. I said, well, Sari, why don't you take a bedroom here? It only costs you $25 a month. So she did. She was our roommate here for 15 years, still into her 92, I think was the last time she was here. She died at age 93 up in her home in Stony Point. But she was sort of the mentor and brought all kinds of people in here at that time, and we were, let's say, wide-eyed youth doing our thing, but she was sort of our den mother, I'd call it. She'd take us to all kinds of events, and then she would host her Wednesday evening poker game here, which included John Lennon and John Cage, and all these women artists were coming by, and then so she was sort of the guiding light here for us coming and going. And then when the owner of the pub was going to retire and sell the place, and he couldn't sell it because it was such a rundown, out-of-the-way place. And so he was Hungarian, though, as was Sari. And when Sari wanted, he would meet her on the street, and then he'd take her into the back room because they wouldn't let her sit at the bar.
Because she's a woman.
Well, they call her Phyllis Diller because at the time she had a big blondish afro. She called it her blonde fro or something
Amazing.
like that. And they thought she was the comedian. And so they, here comes Phyllis. Yeah, go to the back. And so she and Harry, they loved to speak Hungarian. And so then he said, I want to sell the bar. And she said, well, I'll put this guys to work, And so she bought the bar for a song.
Amazing.
So she was actually the founder of the pub as we know it. And we took out the pool table, much to our regret, and the pinball machines and whatever was down there because we wanted a restaurant.
Yeah.
Because it was otherwise we were cooking up here, but it was miles to get any food here. There's no grocery store even for miles.
No restaurants, nothing.
No. There was a diner for the truckers. That's about it. And this place was so back then kind of rough because you had a homeless contingent over here. You had the Westie gang over here. You had the mafia truckers over here, the garbage companies, and And the old owner who never visited here, because she was told this is not a safe place for a woman to go, and she never was here in her whole life, even though she owned it for, I don't know, 50 years or so. And finally, when we got the restaurant going, we invited her for dinner. And I was a cook there, and we had our what we call international home cooking with the French artist Jean Dupuis and his wife Olga Adorno as the chefs. And I was the sous chef, chopping and making chocolate mousse every morning, that sort of thing. But then the owner was amazed that the place was alive, and that suddenly Sari was the queen of the bar. And at the time, across the street, there opened up the Feminist Art Institute. And she was one of the marchers, guerrilla girls at MoMA. And I mean, the Sari, the elder, was the elder of this particular movement back in the 70s.
And this was across the street on Spring Street? On Spring Street,
directly across the street. And at that time, we were publishing Ear magazine, and we had an office across the street again. So we had all these musicians around, all these artists around. The place was packed.
Right.
And it was kind of very difficult to get much service going on it. Sometimes it got too full in the beginning years. But without her and making a deal in Hungarian, we would have all gone away, and they probably would have torn the place down because it was about to fall down.
Right.
And since then, every year we do some project and reconstruction, and it's secure, but it's still a condemned building.
Yes.
With no C of O, and our main point of this construction is to get fire escapes. To get out of here, because there's no way you can stop a fire in this house.
Yeah, because it's all wood.
This was the kind of building that burned the entire block back in the bad old days of that. And so this house was used as fire training for the rookie fire brigade to they'd say, get in all your gear, go upstairs and get that baby up in that bedroom. And they couldn't get through the door. They couldn't get, I was like, oh my God, this is, man, I hope we never have a fire in here, because you can't even get, there was a train to see how dangerous it can be in this without all the modern, let's say, equipment, staircases that are wide enough, and fire doors, and all things that are the safety factor for all the new buildings.
Right.
But meanwhile, we can stay here and live here, but we cannot rent it out as an apartment. It has no C of O.
Right.
And the pub restaurant operates on a waiver from the Landmarks Commission to the Health Department of the city agency, saying that it predates all known laws about any of this. So therefore, we are great-great-grandmothered in, and any inspector who comes in here, we say, nothing applies to us except the merriment that keeps the house going.
Exactly. And so tell us about some of the art that Sari left on the walls, or what you guys have in the foundation upstate, or what, I mean, I saw some works when I first checked out the space a while back, but I can't really remember what her work looks like.
Well, she had a long career from when she was a youth in Hungary, and she was kicked out of whatever school she was in, and she went to study music in Vienna. Then she moved to Paris and was friends with Robert Duncan, Isadora Duncan's brother, who ran a print shop. And so as a teenager, she started making prints and textile designs, and she was running around in Paris in the 1920s.
Right.
And studied with Ferdinand Léger and Georges Braque.
Wow.
And knew Picasso and this sort of, when she was a young woman. And I don't know if she ever, this is a sideline, she would go down to the bar to meet people, and she'd say, oh, I'm an artist, how about you? And said, oh, do you like art? And then she said, do you really like Picasso? And they said, oh, of course. And what she did was, here's a Picasso for you.
Oh, okay, like pinch them.
Yes, which is, for an elderly woman to do that to a young man, the men would just blush. Even in the dark.
And how much, I mean, who was selling her work at that time? Did she have a gallery, or did she sell herself?
She was with the Mayer Gallery. She was a friend of Max Ernst and Leonard Carrington, and then taught drawing and painting at the Aux Enfants School in Paris. And then she moved to London and married another Hungarian who was a mathematician. And then she was the director of the art school in London, where she hired Henry Moore as an assistant. This is going back in the 30s.
Wow.
Then Europe fell into chaos, but she came over to New York to open up another branch of this art school. And we have correspondence with her in French with the founder of it in France at the time. But at that time, she was doing surrealist work. a lot of oil paintings and things which we've been restoring now that we found them and tried to conserve them.
Right.
But so she became a refugee here because her home in London was bombed in the Blitz, and then she was a Hungarian citizen, an enemy alien, so she was not allowed to go back.
Yeah.
And so then she became part of the refugee European decampment, particularly artists, scientists, writers. There was a lot of them that escaped to here, so that period is now well documented. But she ran with the Hungarian crowd quite a bit, Andre Curtis and various other. We find a lot of correspondence, found out more about it because when she went through, let's say, her kind of struggle to survive, she taught at the New School. And she got a studio up on 57th Street, and then there was a fire that burned out her studio, and then she decamped to the southwest and knew various of the Georgia O'Keeffe and others that are down there.
Yeah.
And then she said that going out to the west in that landscape changed her view of visuals. So she went from the surrealism, like her ear painting in 1945, to sort of abstractionism and printmaking. All these different ones that are, they're kind of a mixed imagery, and she specialized in frottage, rubbing. Negative prints on plaster, techniques we still don't know quite how she did it.
Right.
But she piled up her warehouse-sized studio up in Stony Point, New York, to the ceiling with all of her things, and because she never moved again, she gathered quite a bit from her time, and so when she died at age 93. Let's say she'd been through so many different periods of visually and personally. The artist cooperative community that she was a member of did not want to keep her studio as her own museum. They wanted to clear it out and somebody else moved in. So she lived there 33 years paying rent on this, but it was a non-equity home for all these artists, so she got her $100 admission fee back after 33 years of paying a mortgage and rent there. It was cheap rent, but it meant she had nothing. We had to pay for her funeral expenses, and then we had to move all of what we could salvage into a shed we built.
Yes.
And so since then, it's been sitting in a giant pile, and we've been slowly getting it cataloged and get curators to come up. And so in the last few years, we've had a Representative Pavel Zubok, who had a gallery in Chelsea. Now he's out on the art fair showing. So she just works out of Chicago, and then they're going to have another exhibition for her in Basel. We placed works with the Whitney and MoMA and Manil, Hammer Museum and Virginia Museum. So the curators have come and said, well, she was actually there as a mentor to others. And the reason why the curators have gotten so interested is because Jasper Johns, when his retrospective, said, well, who was your major influence when you were a young artist? He said, well, Sari Dienes. And the interview said, well, who's that? He said, well, you should go see these people who have it. And Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg used to camp at her studio when they were working for her, and that began their relationship. And then they went on to use many of her techniques and became, let's say, the world's wealthiest artist. And she always said, because she was a woman, they never paid attention to her. She was a member of the Cedar Tavern Club and Betty Parsons Gallery. She showed with Jackson Pollock and all the other ones at that time, but partly because she was somewhat temperamental about doing business, that she just never had commercial success, but she was always making new things, and every decade she came up with a whole different technique often.
Wow. I mean, amazing. And did you ever go out sailing with her? Because I know you're a big sailor, and you had a boat at one point docked outside here on the Hudson River.
Yes, I'd take her out, but mostly up the river where we were, which was a little easier, because the small sailboat out of New York Harbor is like going for a cruise on a roller coaster.
Right.
And but she was pretty game. We almost tipped the boat over once, and she thought it was terribly funny.
And tell us about the boat that you just had recently, the German one, and the story behind that, because I think it's a great story in general. The Clamor, or what was it called again?
Clang.
The Clang, yeah. Tell us about the Clang.
Oh, well, we had another little sailboat out here with the River Project and a community boat that, again, was getting kicked around too much. So a group of us decided we're going to get a bigger boat so we can have more people that would be more stable in the harbor.
Mm-hmm.
And we found it up in up in Essex, Connecticut,
Mm-hmm.
and it was an old wooden yawl that had sunk. And when I first saw it, only the mast was out of the water, but
Mm-hmm.
the price was such a steal that we said if you bring it up and you inspect it, it's okay. We'll buy it for whatever we had at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that began about a 15-year restoration project on this 54-foot overall yawl-rigged, heavy boat from Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
built in Falmouth, England, and then worked out of Jersey Island in the Channel Islands off the coast of France. And then we found out that it had been part of the evacuations in 1940 and was a decorated veteran of the little ship evacuation of British troops, not at Dunkirk, but from Saint-Malo in the Western Channel.
Mm-hmm.
And this has led us, we had a website, we had membership parties and sailing. We had it out at the Greenport, a green point out on the island.
Mm-hmm.
The harbor was just too rough for it. This boat is built in 1924, so we had it at age where you don't really want to go take Granny out in rough water, and just sitting at the mooring off of Manhattan, it was just getting beat up by the ferry boat. So we took it out there, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've given it to the Jersey Heritage Trust in the Isle of Jersey, because they want it as the centerpiece of their museum.
Perfect.
And it's an operating boat, so they were amazed that it was still out sailing around.
Mm-hmm.
And we put it up on the Hard, and they were going to ship it over. But then Brexit has fouled up their funding, and even Jersey, the Isle of Jersey, which is part of it's an allied crown relationship dating from William the Conqueror. So the Isle of Jersey owes allegiance to the Duke of Normandy, which happened to be William the Conqueror. So it's gone down for 900 years that they're part of the family of the British realm, except when I was there talking about bringing the clang over, they would say, well, we with Brexit, we really should just join France again. I mean, they speak French, take the euro there. They can see France out their window, and so why do we have to be part of those rabble in London and all that?
Rabble-rousers,
But then their charity they set up over there to bring the clang over, it just never has raised money to even get it over there. So it's sitting on land wrapped up, ready to go in Mystic, Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
And some people at the seaport up there have been watching out for it, and I have my own little boat, and I'm out working on ships all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So
when was your last trip, or when is the next one?
Oh, every year I go around the world by sea. Last trip I was sailing from where did I go? Dubai to Egypt to the Mediterranean.
Wow.
And later this year, in the winter, I go on another ship across the Pacific, Tahiti to New Zealand and Australia.
That sounds like a great trip too.
Well, it's a big ocean out there.
Yeah, it's a big ocean, and we're all trying to keep it clean and alive.
That's right. When the seas do rise, we will have a lovely neighborhood here where there'll be canals, and we'll have gondolas and Uber canoes, and get rid of all this traffic.
Venice, Amsterdam.
It'll be as charming as Venice is when there's nobody there.
Right.
I mean, we got our climate change specialists that come in and talk about it, and I show them our graphic about how this house will be on a peninsula, and Canal Street will be a big bay, and a lot of the village will be underwater, but it'll be fine. We're just not sure if we can float to keep up with it. Detach from our concrete neighbors and float like a boat here.
Absolutely.
But anyway, Sari is busier now than she was in her life.
Right.
And so we represent her work, or rather the gallerist does, and so...
Pavel Zubok.
Pavel Zubok.
Zubok, yes.
He was a specialist in collage, and so it's you being an art curator yourself, it's a very personal business, and we've sold enough work to do a complete inventory of what we can get the scope of her work.
Yeah.
And so we're, but art history moves in very slow ways, and right now Pavel is very busy with what's her name, Hermine German, the collagist.
I'm gonna have to search it. I don't know.
Well, she does pretty wild assemblages, but she's taking most of the oxygen out of the gallery, I'd say, because she's so dramatic.
Right. Well, I'm going to search his program because I know the name, but I don't really know who he shows.
Well, it's he does believe that Sari's work was so seminal way back when, and her life is almost the history of 20th century art, from Paris in the 20s to time she spent in Japan and then around here. And we've been trying to find a writer who will write her biography because her life was so dramatic. And then at every decade there's another visual legacy of it.
Yeah.
And
maybe a student could do a thesis or something on it and make that a book.
Well, we've had some of that done, thesis done at Art Institute of Chicago, which by a curator named Kate Zeller, who after researching quite a while, she said that Sari had a difference because her work was not about herself, and she compared him directly against her colleagues, Jackson Pollock and the rest of them. The abstract, even the abstract expressionists, they were very so personal. This is the way I do it. Where Sari was always discovering something and moving on to a different format, and so she was somewhat less egoful than particularly Pollock. And she relates the story that once at the Cedar Tavern, some show of Betty Parsons, Pollock, in his usual drunkenness, said, "Sari, the problem with you can't really paint because you don't have balls." And she replied to him, "Well, Jackson, that's your problem, not mine."
That's brilliant. It really, and I mean, I love what Jackson did, but I'm sure it was extremely difficult to go around having any sort of conversations with these guys. I mean, I would not have got along in that time either, I'm sure. But is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up here?
Well, you can look at, particularly for Sari, you can just go saridienes.org, SARIDIENES, and we have news about her work, but we keep finding more, the things that we didn't know before. She didn't ever talk about her past. She was always about the now.
Amazing.
And she was sort of a Buddhist with her sense of presence, and then the pub's open. I mean, without her, this place would not be here, literally, physically.
The air would not be here.
And so I put up her iconic surreal ear painting, which had been burnt and damaged so bad. We with what little funds we've been getting from these things, paying our friends the Garlovins, who were old master restorationists who worked at the Met, and they spent 6 months restoring that painting.
Amazing.
And then I made a glissé print, so I didn't have sunshine on the original. But we're waiting for her retrospective, which is probably going to be in Europe. We've already had a number of European shows and dedicated shows to her over there.
Yeah.
We're trying to do it in Budapest, actually. Have her home return to Hungary.
Yes.
But meanwhile, we may have some more in New York. But again, I'm not around. It's my wife Barbara who is the curator and knows how all this is going on. We have a board and advisors, she's sort of the best ghost in the house, among others.
Right. Well, when I heard this story from you, it explained my unexplainable attraction to this place. From the first moment I ever stepped in here, it just felt right. I mean, and knowing the history of it, I can see why I would love it. Anyways, I'm gonna sign off.
All right. Well, thanks for listening.
Yeah. Thank you for being here with us.